Dear students, in the former video, we discussed the poem I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. The poem was written by famous American poetess Emily Dickinson, and we had discussed its some of its important aspects. Today, we will also discuss the same poem, and we'll try to appreciate the poem critically also, and we'll focus on some important aspects of the poem, and we'll also discuss this poem as a poem on death, on the theme of death. The poem is a satire on the traditional view of death. The whole poem satirizes the traditional view of death as a peaceful release from life's pressures and a glorious entrance into immortality. The poetess sees only disappointment, a buzzing fly, and the terrible attempts of a soul to prolong life. In writing her best poems, Emily Dickinson was never at the mercy of her emotions or of the official rhetoric. She mastered her themes by controlling her language. In this poem, for instance, she achieves a novel significance by starting with a death scene that implies the orthodox questions and then turning the meaning against itself by the strategy of surprise answers. The poem operates in terms of all the standard religious assumptions of Miss Dickinson's New England, but with a difference. They are explicitly gathered up in one phrase for the moment of death with distinct biblical overtones. That last onset, when the king be witnessed in the room. As the poetess dramatizes herself in a deathbed scene with family and friends gathered round, her heightened senses report the crisis in flat domestic terms that bring to the reader's mind each of the traditional questions, only to deny them without even asking them. Her last words were squandered in distributing her keepsakes, trivial tokens of this life, rather than messages from the other. The only sound of heavenly music or of wings taking flight was the blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz of a fly that filled her dying ear. Instead of a final vision of the hereafter, this world, uh, this world simply faded from her eyes. The light in the windows failed, and then she could not see to see. The king witnessed in his power is physical death, not God. To take this poem literally as an attempted inside view of the gradual extinction of consciousness and the beginning of the soul's flight into eternity would be to distort its meaning, for this is not an imaginative projection of her own death. In structure, in language, in imagery, it is simply an ironic reversal of the conventional attitudes of her time and place toward the significance of the moment of death. Yet, mystery is evoked by a single word that extraordinarily interposed color blue. The poem I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died, and another poem Because I Could Not Stop for Death, may be regarded as previsions of her own death. In neither of these two poems does death present himself as absolute in some brutal majesty. nor in the role of God's dreadful minister. The transaction is homely and easy, for the author has complete sophistication in these matters, having attended upon deathbeds and knowing that the terror of the event is mostly for the observers. In the first poem, a sort of comic or gothic relief interposes by one of those homely inconsequences which may be observed in fact to attend even upon a desperate human occasions. The other poem is a more imaginative creation. It is a single sustained metaphor, all of its analog through the character called Death. In the carriage would have borne the same name in the real situation. The victim of death now is the shy spinster, so he presents himself as a decent civil functionary making a call upon a lady to take her for a drive. So we have seen that this was a very short poem upon the theme of death, and Emily Dickinson presents her views against the traditional views of death, and so it is a satire on the traditional view of death. Thanks for listening.